session, I'm chatting with Marc. I thought this would be a good one to start our series. It's a good way of establishing our credentials and our history. Marc and I worked together along with Ali Thompson from about 2013 to 2017, when the internet and certainly search engine optimization, the rules surrounding it, were a bit more Wild West than they are now. We actually operated in the most competitive area of digital marketing for law firms, which was personal injury. Lawyers were paying such fees for cases that the advertising infrastructure that supported it had gone through the roof. And we took advantage of that by trying to achieve strong organic rankings. In so doing, we outperformed the biggest law firms in the UK, without any doubt, and we had a lot of fun while we were doing it. In this discussion, we explain how we did it, how we went about it, and what's happened since then. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening.
Oh, hi, Marc. Nice to see you.
Hello, Stephen.
Been a while.
Yeah, has been.
Yeah, you're looking well as ever.
Thank you.
Slightly smaller than you were when we first met, but I think that was probably as a result of you spending a lot of time working consistently on search engine optimization while maybe eating donuts and drinking Coke. Would that be the case?
Yeah, and I think having a young toddler at the time, you don't really have time to stop to think about your health, do you? So yeah, thank you for the compliment, if it was a compliment.
And what I was keen to talk to you about today, I mentioned to you this on the phone, was about when we first met. I think it must have been round about 2013.
That's right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I'm not sure if you can remember our first piece of contact.
I think I'd created a lead generation website, or I was starting to. I think that's how it worked, and I was trying to find a business partner who might be able to help me earn money out of that website. And I think that might be how I tracked you down. I'm not sure. Does that sound right to you?
Yep. No, it was via LinkedIn. In fact, I remember receiving an inquiry via LinkedIn. I think as you said, you had set up a personal injury website to generate inquiries specifically focused on the London area.
Yes.
And you'd reached out to solicitors, I think via LinkedIn, and unsurprisingly, none of these solicitors had actually got back to you.
Yes, now the bell has rung for me. So yeah, that's right. So I created a website to generate personal injury inquiries effectively. So for people in London looking for a solicitor so they can make an accident claim. And I can't remember how long it took me to create the site, maybe 3 to 4 months, possibly 6. I'm not sure, but it started to generate inquiries. I can't recall if I had a phone number on it. It might have just been email inquiries. So in my mind, it was quite a valuable asset. So I thought I need to find someone who also thinks it's a valuable asset, who can actually do something with these inquiries. So I contacted a load of solicitors, and sadly, for them, I guess, retrospectively, none of them really understood what I was talking about, didn't respond, or probably thought I was a bit of an idiot. And then I think I contacted you. And,
yeah. I think at that time, lead generation within the personal injury sector was not something that was being done hugely online. It was mainly being done via claims management companies, liaising with solicitors and selling them leads that they were generating through other means. And at that point, as far as I can remember, I think personal injury was the most expensive category of online advertising that there was.
Yeah, and that's why I created the site. So at the time, I mean, I've worked in online marketing since 1999, I think. So quite a while, and about 10 years ago, I became my own boss and started creating websites that would hopefully earn me money. I wanted to create a website where I knew there was high value customers. So if I recall, I looked in the Google AdWords system to see, well, what search queries cost the most in Google AdWords for someone to click on. So, you have the normal organic search results on a Google page, and then you'd have the ads down the side, very much like you still do today. And people could bid to have their ad there. Now, what I found was, after just trawling through data, that search phrases such as accident claims in London or personal injury solicitors in London, they had the most expensive average clicks. Now, I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it could have possibly been between £30 to £50. I can't say that for sure, but that sounds about right. So I thought, well, if a law firm's prepared to pay £30 every time somebody clicks an ad, surely they'd be inclined to take leads if I can generate those leads at potentially a cheaper cost for them, or a constant tap where they don't have to spend on advertising through that way. So that's why I created this initial website for personal injury solicitors, leads within the London area. So that was the that was the rationale behind it. It was just me trying to find a leads that I thought had high value. I didn't have any particular affinity with the legal sector at all at that point. It was just, that was why.
So no legal experience or no understanding of the legal market?
No, I've never had to use a solicitor, and I've never had any interest in law, and I'd never made a personal injury claim myself. So it was no, totally fresh to it. Yeah.
And was this a strategy that you could follow in other niches, or were you following this in other niches as well, or was there a group that you were a part of?
I mean, at the time, if I kind of cast my mind back, so what we're now 2022. So I think around 2010, I was working. Was it 2011? Yeah, around 2011, I was working in Switzerland at the time for a company, and cut a long story short, I was kind of very responsible for my own time, and I wasn't really accountable to anybody in the office, and I had a bit of time on my hands outside of my job, so I started researching ways where I could make more money online.
Yeah.
So came across these various groups run by chaps in America of how you could use something called SEO, search engine optimization, how you could either get clients and get their websites high up in Google, or create your own websites and then monetize them in some way. Now, obviously, as I was working for a business at that time, trying to suddenly set up a client agency wasn't going to be the easiest thing for me to do. So I thought, well, let's use these skills that I'm learning within these courses to do search engine optimization and create my own websites to make money. Now, I think off the top of my head, before the personal injury one, I think I tried something like double glazing. I'm sure it was something along those lines. And I ended up selling the site, not for huge amounts of money, but to a double glazing firm. And then I was like, well, if I can do that for that, let's now try it for something which could be more lucrative. So the reality was, the personal injury site it was only like the second ever website I'd ever tried this kind of search engine optimization on. And I started to get results very quickly, I found.
And when you say quickly, I mean, I think the impression I got from you at the time, and I think it's worth highlighting, is that knowing you as I do now, and for the length of time that I do now, and also the working relationship that we developed, you are a fairly obsessive type of guy, and that once you are into something, you're fully into it. You know, you go full tilt at it. And for me, that's been something that would typify the effective search engine optimization practitioner, in that there is a significant amount of work that has to be put in place prior to any return being generated, particularly if you're working on a new domain. Could you explain just a bit about that, because you're sort of underplaying it a bit, but I imagine the work that you put in was fairly significant.
Oh yeah, it was huge amounts. So the task, obviously, it was creating a website and then making it look like it was legitimate. So it couldn't just be a blog; it had to look like a bona fide legal firm. Despite the fact, when I set it up, it obviously it wasn't. So there was setting the website up, the design of the website, then the content. So what I had to do very, very quickly was research what people are searching for. So in London, it might be they're not just after a personal injury solicitor in London, but they also might be searching for, let me just think, it could be an accident they've had in a supermarket, or it could be they've tripped on a loose paving slab somewhere in Westminster. And there's all these different ways that people are searching for that end result, which is a personal injury solicitor. So it could be, I want to make an accident claim. I've had a car accident. I want to make a claim about that within the London area. So it's doing all that research. Right, what are people searching for? Then I spent probably a month reading every single personal injury solicitor's website that I could, and then creating in Word these pieces of long form content, because I wanted this site I had to appear for every conceivable accident claim query someone might make in London. So there was a page about a supermarket accident claim. There was a page about a road traffic accident claim, work accident claims. I mean, in the end, there was probably something like 50 odd pages, all of which I wrote myself. And, you know, the length of these pages, they could be, you know, 1,500 words in effect. So I very quickly became not just someone who was doing SEO, but somebody who had a over averaged knowledge of the personal injury market, obviously not compared to a bona fide solicitor, but for the majority of people, it's having to write all that content. But then it wasn't just about the website and the content, but it was getting it to appear in Google. And that's where the SEO, or the sort of the science behind it came in, which is a different conversation again. So yeah, there was lots of work to be done, because it's not just building a website. You don't just build it and it appears at the top of Google. In those days, there were lots of, I guess the best way to describe it was hacks and tricks to get it to appear above, you know, the long established personal injury companies that had been in London or the UK at that point, all those big names. And it used to make me laugh, because I'd watch TV and you'd suddenly see a TV ad for a personal injury company. And you think, well, I don't know how much they're spending on these ads. And I thought, well, in the space of 6 months, I've almost cornered that market in London, just by myself. So that was, yeah, that was.
I think you know, the content itself, the amount of time that you spent writing that, I remember it being very significant. I remember at the time when you spoke to us, you were already ranking extremely well, and you were generating, from memory, I think about 50, 60 inquiries a month at that point. And that was before we'd even put a phone number on the site. The search engine optimization, so there's the content and there's the design, and you have to make sure that it's appearing well in search, and it looks like something that somebody would call and they would trust.
Yeah.
What did you think of the state of the search engine optimization market at that time, particularly in relation to solicitors and personal injury, given how much people were prepared to pay for inquiries or for calls at that time? Yeah,
I mean, I think, okay, so I'd come not too long after building that website, and it started to generate leads. I left my job, moved back to England, because I could see that I could make money out of this. Now, what I soon quickly realized, having moved out of a corporate environment into being my own person, you realize that the knowledge within sort of a corporate business, you know, whether that's a big law firm, in terms of digital marketing, was virtually nil. And then you also compare that to sort of knowledge you might see in a what would be called a web agency. You know, they'd be selling SEO, but actually at the time what they were doing might get results in some markets, but in the highly competitive ones, it was unlikely to, because and then this is just my personal experience. The people I knew who worked within corporations as digital marketing people, and also the people, or a lot of people who were working in digital agencies as well, they didn't have they didn't truly understand some of the things you could do to manipulate Google and get the best results out of it. So for an example, at that time, 10 years ago, it was all about the links, the backlinks to a site. So if you can imagine at that point, and Google's a lot more clever now, but at that time, if you had a website, if another website was linking to it, Google would look on that as kind of like a vote. So let's say you've got your website here and there's another website here. If that website has a link to that one, Google's thinking, well, this one here must be good. Let's raise it up the rankings. But the thing is, not all links were equal. So not all votes were equal. So in effect, you had to get relevant links. So if this is a law site, you ideally want other websites that are to do with law to link to them, because then Google's going, well, that means this one must be really relevant. So how could I game that system was the next sort of chapter in this process of how to convince Google that my website here was the one that had to be top of the list, and so there was a certain amount of gaming the system that then came into play.
And it's one of the elements that we're trying to sort of cover in this discussion is understanding how that's evolved and how that's changed. You mentioned that Google's becoming increasingly sophisticated, and that's something that we're all aware of and understand, because it's wanting to provide users with the best possible experience and the most relevant results, whilst also protecting and prioritizing its Google Ads platform. And you mentioned web agencies, and typically web agencies would work for a customer, and as such, they would in the main take a slightly less risky approach, or maybe would avoid the gaming of the system to the extent that you or I might have done in the past with sites that we owned, because the only person who was going to suffer if the site was penalized would have been you or me, for example. So in terms of achieving these link profiles in order to rank your site more quickly, what would you do?
So this is where it all became really interesting. So I would go into what are effectively called domain marketplaces. So what you were able to do was I was able to buy up old domains. So bear in mind, earlier I said, if that's your website, you want websites that are to do with law to link to it, because then Google thinks your website's the best one and it'll put it hopefully top of the pile. So the strategy at the time that myself and I'm sure thousands of people were doing around the world at the time, I was buying up old domains that had expired. So for example, I might find on the domain marketplace that there was an old website that used to be run by maybe a solicitor somewhere in the UK. Maybe that business had folded, or they'd changed the name of the business. The domain would be back in the marketplace. I could then buy that domain and in effect repurpose it. So what I'm then doing is I'm creating another website here that's all about law, that's on a domain name that used to be about law. So in Google's eyes, it's got a bit of relevancy. And there's my website here, the one I want to make the money. And with this website domain name I've just bought, I put a load of new legal content on it and then link to that one. But it wasn't just one. There was a huge network of these. It was almost like if you can imagine a bicycle wheel. So you've got your website in the middle and you've got loads of other spokes around the outside all linking into the middle. Well, on the end of those spokes were all these these old domains that I bought, repurposed, tried to legitimize them in Google's eyes by making them look about law, putting law content on them, logos, and then linking into the site that I wanted to rank. Now, you had to make sure that you didn't want to leave a footprint behind for Google to see, because whilst I wasn't doing anything illegal, what I was doing was against Google's terms of service. So because I was in effect trying to manipulate the search engine. So every single one of these sites on the outer of the spoke had to be, I had it on a different host, a different platform. I'd have different Sorry, let me just get rid of that message that just popped up on the screen. I had to get rid of. Sorry, I had to put different personas behind them. So part of that was creating their own Google properties in effect. So I'd end up going to the supermarket when it first opened in the morning. I'd be buying maybe 10 to 20 £1 SIM cards, probably looking like a drug dealer. Then I'd come home. What I'd then do with those SIM cards would be I'd register a Google business to all these other sites to make them look like someone completely different, and then link them to that site I wanted to rank. I hope I'm explaining this properly, but it was just a way of trying to hide any footprint with Google.
So in order to effectively get your Death Star personal injury site in London rising to the top of search, you were buying old domains that belonged either to law firms or businesses that had been associated with the legal market. They already had a digital footprint to an extent with a backlink profile, and then you would then point those sites, or you would link those sites to your main site, and as such pass on the domain strength, and it would increase the rankings further in Google.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
So, and just because with each of these sites, you would also be spending time writing content for them.
Yeah.
And built and content written belonging to a Google personality. And by that I mean, and it's something we can discuss, is that Google was beginning to place more importance at that time on the relationship between an online property and a physical property.
Yeah.
And an actual person.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, personalities had to be created, personas in effect, which is where obviously these different phone numbers came in, because I had to create a Google. I don't think they do it anymore, but you used to be able to create a Google Plus page, I think it was called at the time.
Yeah.
And, if people had a Google Plus page, you could then say they owned or they were an author of a website. So it was just me, but I had multiple personalities. There was something like, I don't know, I was probably running 30 to 50 websites, all to get that one website to rank. And when I say running 30 to 50 websites, it wasn't like a daily thing. Once I'd set one of these out-of-spoke websites up under a different personality and linked to the main one in the middle, I could kind of leave it be, and just very rarely do any maintenance on it. So yeah, there was a heck of a lot of work involved to game the system, as it were.
How difficult was it mentally to be writing so much content of the same nature for different websites?
Oh, yeah, it was really tough, and I got completely burned out by it. But another thing worth mentioning, it wasn't just the London one I created. I did ones in other cities around the UK. Off the top of my head, let me just think. I think there were 6 cities I was doing this in, maybe 6, and all with these kind of link networks to rank them top of Google. I can't even remember how many leads it was generating at the end. It must have been in hundreds of leads a month, I'm pretty sure, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, I think we ended up having a whole network of sites, and it's probably worth saying at this point that Mark was working with myself and Ali Thompson of Hey Legal now on this, where we built effectively a UK-wide portfolio of websites, all generating leads for the personal injury sector, which were then sold to a claims management company, who then sold them on to law firms all over the UK, and it became a very good business for all of us. Very good fun.
Yeah, it was. It was good fun.
I think part of the aspect of it being good fun was because there was, there was the gaming of the system. There was the fact that the risk you were taking was entirely your own, and that the sites were your own, and you were able to take more chances with them than you would do otherwise.
Yeah,
but also they
absolutely.
became very significant generators of revenue for us all. And I know you've described it as being that there's obviously a lot of work involved behind the scenes, but once you got a site performing and performing well, they became relatively passive sources of income.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they could become passive sources of income, but there's no real, I don't think you can really describe it as passive income, because the amount of work that went in before that was incredible. But you're right. It was the tactics that were being used. I wouldn't have used them on a client's website, because there was always that risk that Google would go, hang on a minute, we can see what you're gaming the system. And the risk was potentially that they then de-index your website out of Google. Now, that never happened. Never happened at all. The sites were never penalized, but there was always that risk of it happening. So I always looked on these websites as they are disposable. They probably won't last forever. But I can take this risk on it because it's my risk, right? I wouldn't have done it on a client's site. So, earlier when I was saying about, I don't know, possibly agencies working for a client, and maybe I was a little bit unfair on people working in agencies, because actually the reality was it would have been quite risky to have done this on a client's website, because the risk that you run is Google could, like I said, remove that website out of Google's search index if they think you're using nefarious methods to get it to rank. And you wouldn't want to have that responsibility of someone's day-to-day business. So, yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but around about that time, Irwin Mitchell,
Yes.
who are one of the biggest personal injury firms and sort of nationwide law firms, their site disappeared from Google. I think it was from the Penguin update, and the reason
Yes.
the reason that I know that is because I shortly afterwards I sent the chief executive or the managing partner of Irwin Mitchell a postcard with a penguin on it, saying, I know penguins are cute, but not when they destroy your online presence. It was something along those lines. Unsurprisingly, I never heard back from them, but I think what it did show was that search engine optimization has always been considered a dark art. People used to say that to me, and I think part of the reason for that was because there were degrees of risk that you could take in terms of your approach, and as you mentioned, there was the link building. Now, at that point, certainly prior to that, all link building roads seemed to lead to Mumbai, and it was the volume of links that were pointing back at your site rather than the relevance that could quite quickly bounce you up the rankings. But the risk you ran, I think, was what ended up happening was this sort of unnatural link building pattern. But the way that you describe it, that was something that you were avoiding by being very careful about the types of sites that you were choosing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, everyone who's worked in business for the last decade will remember those emails you get from companies saying that they can get your website to the top of Google, and potentially it might have worked at some point, but I tried to be a bit more prescribed and a bit more, I don't know if scientific's the right word, maybe just a bit more sneaky, maybe, and that's a better descriptor. But effectively, yeah, that's why I said earlier, I wanted every site that I owned to be on a different host. I wanted to have a different Google account associated to it, hence all the SIM cards, because you need a unique phone number to create a Google account. I wanted all the websites I was running to have different designs on, different footprints, almost like a different personality, like we said earlier, because that was the way that you wouldn't be detected in an algorithm. So for example, the sites that did get hit, maybe by a penguin or whatever it might be, if they've got 1,000 links coming to them that have been manufactured from 1,000 different websites, but all those websites are on the same guy's host somewhere in Manchester, then it's obvious it's the same person creating those links. So that's what we tried not to do. And I say we because there were other people. It wasn't just me doing this. There were other people doing this as well, and who were very successful at it. More successful than myself, for sure.
No, I don't know if you remember. There was one site that we worked with a lot, which was similar and performed, astronomically.
Yep.
Outperformed all the major personal injury players nationwide for the most expensive key phrases on the internet.
Yes.
And the approach that he effectively bought the domain of that belonged to an inquiry, which had been pointed to by press all over the world. BBC, university websites, Wall Street Journal, turned that into a personal injury site and then pointed it at his domain. And it was an incredible achievement, and the amount of income he made from it, in comparison with most solicitors who are spending their time knocking their pans in with billable hours, was, it had to be applauded. But I suppose, to a large extent, these elements have begun to disappear from search engine optimization. But what I'd like to go back to is you mentioned this, the Google Plus profile.
Yeah.
Google Places became a very, very quick way of achieving good rankings for, certainly we did it in Really Go Technology, for our customers. And at that point, all you had to do was claim a place and list your firm, and suddenly you started appearing in what was called the snack pack, which appeared with local search engine results.
Yep, that's right.
At that point, it was extremely easy to claim a place. Can you remember some of the techniques that you used for that?
Yeah, so if I recall, so let's say, and I'm going to make a hypothetical example now. If you'd said to me, let's generate personal injury leads in Liverpool, we would have created the website to make it look like a bona fide legal firm in Liverpool. But part of that would have also been giving them a physical postal address, because Google wants to know that you're in that geographical area. So how would you get a physical postal address? Well, you just go to a company like, I think Regis were one of the companies, where you can lease office space, but you don't actually have to be there. It's kind of like just like a PO box in effect, but not a PO box. So yeah, we maybe spend £30 a month to get a virtual office address. That's the word I'm looking for, somewhere in that city. We then use one of these throwaway SIM cards in order to validate that it is, it's got a unique phone number. It's a genuine business, despite the fact in reality it wasn't even in that city. And then you could also get what we used to call the Google Snack Pack, but in effectively what we're talking about, because at that time a lot more people were starting to use mobile devices for search. Now, as is now, if you were to type in personal injury solicitor in Liverpool, and there's only so much real estate on a phone screen, so what you tended to get first was the Google business physical map location addresses. So, and then you'd scroll down and then you'd see the organic search results. So it was really important for us to get in those map results as well, which is why we were getting those virtual office addresses and trying to make it look like there was a legitimate physical presence in those cities where we were generating leads for.
And I mean, I do remember we had a sort of family law network, and I think the first site I set up, or the first sites we set up, were round about 2009. And I remember claiming a Google My Business place and saying it was basically where the family law, I don't think it would be a sheriff court, but the family law courts were. And almost immediately after having turned it on, that Christmas, I started to receive phone calls from Liverpudlians looking for divorce advice. And I was like, I can't believe how quickly this is happening. Then we had to go out and find a partner for it. But another aspect, I think, that also evolved around that time, which is not in existence anymore, but helped again with the conversion process, was reviews.
Yeah.
Or fake reviews.
Yes. I mean, people doing these strategies, they certainly did write fake reviews. So there was a lot of that going on. I can't say much more than that. But yeah, I mean, you couldn't get away with these sort of things these days, I don't think. But yeah, certainly within the search engine optimization world, trying to game the system with fake reviews was another tactic that people were using at the time. Yeah.
And what we're talking about here, Mark, is the sort of techniques that would have been described previously as white hat and black hat. Black hat being, or sort of white hat, the good guy, following the rules, following Google's rules, doing everything by the book, slowly catchy monkey. Whereas the black hat approach was a bit more outlaw, looking at the rules, interpreting them, looking at gaps and looking at techniques that could then be used to, as you say, to hack them or to game them. Where would you have placed the type of activity that you carried out at points, and was we did as well with certain sites, on that scale of black to white?
Well, I don't know. It's important to say, when I used to say, describe some of these search engine activities to people, they'd be like, I remember one person said, but that's against the law. And I'm like, it's not against the law. Don't be so ridiculous. It's not against the law to build backlinks to a website. You're mad. What it was against was Google's terms of service, because they were very clear that you cannot deliberately try and manipulate the search rankings. And that's what we were doing. We were deliberately trying to manipulate the system. So this whole black hat, white hat thing, I never really got on with that, because I guess it stems from cowboy movies, I'm assuming. We'd have the baddie would be wearing a black cowboy hat and the goodie a white cowboy hat. I wasn't a baddie or a goodie. I wasn't hurting anybody. I was just generating leads within an industry, earning some money for myself, and also connecting up somebody who had a genuine business inquiry with a genuine person who could provide that help to them. So the whole black hat, white hat thing, it was never something I really subscribed to. But if you were to ask an outsider what sort of SEO was it I was doing, they'd probably say, oh yeah, that's black hat SEO. I'm sure they would say that, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, in terms of Google's terms of service and gaming the system, that's how the entire search engine optimization service evolved. Because I remember the first firm that I worked in, Digby Brown, who became a massive, personal injury player, certainly in Scotland. They were way ahead of their time, and I remember the first search engine optimization company that they used, and it must have been in about 2001, 2002. It was very, very early, and the techniques used then were used to game the system.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what? I just want to say one thing, because I remember now actually looking at all these big names in the industry, and they were all doing it or had someone doing it for them. We just happened to be doing it better, because you'd be able to analyze the activity that was going on with one of these big law firms. It was I could very quickly see if they were trying to game the system. And I can't sit here and say they all were doing it, but it was very common. And sometimes you'd look at it, you'd laugh, because you'd think, that is, if I can see that they're doing it, those top brains at Google are going to know that they're doing it, with their computerized robotic systems. So, yeah.
I think at that time, what was clear was that you were having people within marketing departments of bigger firms being charged with looking after the digital marketing. They then speak to an agency, and an agency starts explaining to them how they can how they will improve their ranking. Now, they're not really interested in how.
Yeah.
What they're interested in at that point is the outcome, and they didn't really understand, I think, the risks that were involved. And it was quite difficult in some regards, I think, also because the rules would change continually.
Yeah.
So something that would work, such as the unnatural link building, would work and would work for a significant period of time, and then Google would release an algorithm update, which would then penalize those unnatural link building patterns.
Yeah.
It was quite hard to predict in certain ways.
And they still do it to this day. I think in the last 3 or 4 weeks, there's been a couple of Google updates, so it's still certainly going on. And yeah, you were constantly on your toes, looking at, you know, where you were in Google, what the numbers were on a daily basis. It's actually quite stressful looking back on it now. I'm glad I don't do that anymore, because effectively, you know, you have all your eggs in one basket with some of these websites. So yeah, it could be quite. It was hard to continually be ahead of the game.
Yeah, I think it's hard, and I think what we've discovered, and certainly within legal technology, that's really, really important for us, is you're working with bona fide, legitimate, practicing law firms who have a continual desire to provide as useful a service as they can do, and you are able to reflect that on the internet, which ties in with Google's objectives for providing users with a genuinely helpful experience. Now, that's quite difficult to fake. It's certainly difficult to fake for a long time. You know, it can become very challenging because you're effectively trying to pretend to be something that you're not. And I think Google has been successful and will continue to be successful at weeding those elements out. So the gamification of Google has become more difficult and less attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did for me. The tactics we've been talking about on this phone call, I got out of that game, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, potentially. So I don't do that anymore. And I have a much less stressful lifestyle in terms of, you know, how my business works. But there are still people doing it. So, for example, the biggest threat at the moment is artificial intelligence or AI-based content. You know, with a click of a few buttons, someone could create a personal injury website within minutes or maybe hours. You know, so Google's now got that, and I believe the last few updates that have gone through this last week were probably looking at AI type style content. So, you know, and the reason people went to AI content was there was a sea change some years ago, and you spoke about it. Google wanted to present the most helpful information. So, you know, trying to create something, which is what I do now, which is truly helpful, that is well researched and really helps a customer. That's what Google values more than anything now, or wants to. At least that's what they say. So the whole AI content thing was another way people have been trying to game that. But again, that's something that Google appears to be getting possibly on top of, but it's a moving target for Google all the time. So I don't envy the people still trying to game Google in this way. It must be, it's just, you're just constantly having to either change what you're doing, or you're constantly losing your revenue overnight. You know, I follow some of these people who still do, if we use the black hat term, who still do black hat SEO. I follow them on the internet, you know, and you'll see them one day they're having hundreds of thousands of visitors a day, and then the next day they throw a graph up and it's just fallen off a cliff because they were using AI content or trying to game Google in some way. So it's not something I recommend these days, for sure.
Yeah. And it was something, I suppose, that was of its time, was good fun, because as you said earlier, and we understood, you were able to beat the biggest providers, the biggest businesses, the biggest corporations, and using some hard work and some techniques, you were able to leapfrog them in organic search results, and as a result generate, you know, many hundreds of thousands of pounds of business.
Yeah.
Not for free, because of all the work that you'd put in, but it became a very, very good recurring source of revenue, and that was exciting and good fun.
Yeah, it was,
for
because
a
in
while.
effect, someone in their bedroom like me could create an online law firm in 6 months that was generating, you know, I don't know what sort of sums. We'll have to talk about that maybe off the call, but there was a lot of money
Yeah.
being generated,
Yeah.
more than probably, you know, the majority of law firms. I'm not talking about obviously the big players now, but you know, if there was a law firm in London, we'd be probably beating it in terms of
Yeah.
its sort of the eventual lead revenue that it would be creating for those whoever picked the leads up at the end of the chain. So,
Yeah.
and
And
that's quite a mad concept, really, to think that you can do that. You could have done that at the time when we did. So,
it's also, it's not surprising at all that lawyers didn't pick up with you when you were communicating with them at the outset, because it was quite out there as a concept. The notion that you could actually generate business online was not what it is now. And so, did you have any? Do you still have any involvement with law firms, or is that just in our
no,
past, or our
no,
shared
no,
past anyway?
no, I don't do anything like that anymore. In reality. But what it did do, getting knocked back by these law firms who either didn't reply or just told you to bugger off, it just made me think, do you know what? I'm going to do this even better now as a kind of an FU to them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess to give them their due, they probably had snake oil salesmen contacting them almost on a daily basis. So it's no wonder that they gave me short shrift. But you know, it was lucrative for someone in the end, wasn't it? So yeah.
And so you're not involved in doing search engine optimization for customers or for clients or anything like that anymore? You more run your own sites in a different way, generating income through them from advertising?
I do a little bit of SEO and a little bit of AdWords for a very small handful of clients, people that I enjoy working with. But primarily, I still do the same thing. I create my own websites that earn my business revenue. But everything I do now is entirely legitimate and on Google's terms of service. So it's about creating quality websites with quality content, great user experience. And actually, the weird thing is, what I'm finding is when I create those websites, they're naturally attracting links anyway from, you know, the BBC or a government website, or I don't know, some huge website. It's taking longer. There is more effort, but I'm actually building valuable assets now that the reality is they're very unlikely for Google to ever penalize. So yeah.
So you're sort of like a reformed gang member.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I suppose you. Yeah, I guess you. Yeah, maybe you could say that. Yeah, possibly
Or
so.
sort of poacher turned game. Well, no, you're not really like that. But a reformed gang member, maybe working that you've been on the dark side or darkish side. You know, you don't like this black cat comparison, but darkish, and now you're strictly. I mean, I think if you're wanting to build something for longevity and less stress, then that's really the way that you have to go, and you have to be. I think discovered that over time, that being authentic is a lot easier and more relaxing than trying to be something that you're not.
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah, there's definitely less stress involved, and also as well, not my fear was being in the legal market, working in that legal market. Now, whilst I wasn't doing anything illegal, you're swimming with sharks, right? Ultimately, and people who could quite happily probably try and sue you for something. I don't know what. So I was always a bit like, it was nice to no longer. Sorry, my wife's just messaging me. It was nice to no longer be trying to compete with lawyers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it's because it's quite telling when I phoned you to talk to you about this. You looked at the phone and thought, will I answer this, or is this going to be a legal issue?
Yeah,
arising out of our shared past. But you know, I think that the truth of the matter was it was very good fun. It was of its time, and we all did well out of it. we learned a lot from it, and you can look back, and this is part of this sort of evolving discussion. It's part of the way in which the internet has been used by law firms over the course of the past 20 years, and certainly, 14 or 15 years into Google, it was not in its infancy. However, it was significantly less sophisticated than it is now, and the legal sector was a relatively green field in which one could begin to operate and, as you say, build a virtual law firm, or the appearance of a virtual law firm, and sell the leads in a market where there was a very, very buoyant market for purchasing them. And you identified an opportunity to do that, and together we ended up making the most out of those sites and had good fun while we were doing it. But Marc, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was really good to chat.
It was really good to see you, and hopefully we'll catch up in the not too distant future. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, well, thanks, Stephen, and I look forward to hearing other episodes if you're chatting to other people about this world, because it's interesting.
Well, I've told you soon it's going to be like, I don't know, Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, I think. You're a good starter. No, thank you, Marc. Thanks a lot.
Okay, cool.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.